Episode number 56.
When I shifted my mind a little bit to think about how can I help people? What do they need? It made it a little bit, I would say it made it easier to keep going.
This episode is brought to you by The Collective, which is our monthly membership community for ambitious women who want to continue to build their careers whilst raising a family. Now, once you've had a baby, things might change for you. Once you become a mum, you might be thinking differently about your career, and negotiating what you want can be tough. So within this community, we'll help you to figure out where you want to go with your career and how you could get there. So whether you are switching direction, whether you want to build on what you've already developed in your career thus far, whether you want to launch your own business, we are there to support you step by step, providing the tools, the guidance, the coaching, and the community that you need to move boldly towards the career that you want. So if you're interested in joining an awesome group of women as you navigate the highs and lows of your career beyond motherhood, then head over to lightboxcoaching.com/collective-waitlist and get your name on the list so that I can let you know when the doors will be opening again. We would love to have you join us. Hi, you're listening to the Careers Beyond Motherhood podcast with your host, Janine Esbrand. I'm here to help working mums like you to thrive in your careers and in motherhood. I share tips, strategies, and inspirational conversations with awesome women to help reduce the struggle in your juggle.
Time for a say, Mummy.
Hello and welcome to the show. As always, I'm excited to be here with you today. Last week was such a crazy week. Everybody was getting over illness in our house and things just seemed to be a bit crazy. I'm experiencing a transition for sure in my children, both of them. So my daughter is 1.5. She's going to be 2 in June, and my son is 3.5. He's going to be 4 in May, and I'm seeing them both change slightly and recognizing that the way that we're communicating with both of them and what we're doing needs to change a little bit, because they're clearly going through those transitions where they're exerting their independence and are not afraid to let us know when they're not happy about what we say or what they are asked to do. So it's an interesting time in our house, and I have been reflecting on the importance of communication and adjusting your communication depending on who you're speaking to and what it is you want them to do. So that feeds very well into the conversation that I had with our guest, because we talk about communication and how important it is in the context of emails, in the context of communicating with people in a corporate setting, but also in a business setting, and using email in an effective way. Now, we all know we get a ton of email in our inboxes, and some of those emails we click and open, and others we look over and ignore. So we're going to be looking at that today and looking at ways that you can make sure that your email communication is effective. So whether you are a business owner who is using email as part of your marketing strategy, or if you are in a corporate setting and you use email to communicate with your colleagues, the tips you're going to learn in today's episodes are so useful. I'm going to be interviewing a lovely lady called Maggie Frankshoe. She is an email marketing specialist, and she is also one of my friends and mastermind buddies. I met her in person in Miami, and she is amazing. So if you haven't listened to episode 54 of the podcast, where I talk about the mastermind that I am a part of and the trip to Miami that I had recently, where I got a chance to meet Maggie and the other amazing ladies, then do go and listen to that episode. Maggie is so down to earth. She is the real deal. She's really smart. She's awesome and a whiz with email. So I am really excited to have her on the show and have her sharing some of her golden nuggets with you so that you can be moving forward with your communication in a more effective and impactful way. Without further ado, let's jump into my conversation with Maggie. Hi, Maggie. Thank you so much for joining us today. Please, could you introduce yourself to our audience and tell us a bit about you?
Hey, Janine. Okay, so I'm Maggie Frankshoe. I am the owner of MFH Consulting. I do email marketing for mom business owners specifically, and I could talk about a little bit more about why it's moms. But I live in San Diego, California. I have 2 kids. I've been in business for about 3 years, and I'm a writer by trade. So I started out as a writer. What else do you want to know?
That's fine, because I'm going to dig in and ask you more questions so you can tell us more about you from the answers that you give. Okay. So can you just tell me a bit about what life looked like before you became a mum? So what did your career look like before? You said now you're a business owner. So what were you doing pre-babies?
Yeah, I graduated university, as you guys say, at 22. And then I basically went from job to job. So when I graduated, I didn't know what I wanted to do. I really wanted to be in university for another year at least. I remember being really terrified. I didn't have like a clear direction. I'd always been really good at school, and I had the whole school game figured out. And so I just wanted to stay because I was good at that. But I didn't, obviously. And I got a job kind of doing nothing in Charlotte, North Carolina. Sorry to those people. I'm sure they're not listening, but I really didn't do much. It was one of those jobs. I don't know if these exist anymore, but it was like you could just sort of, I didn't have anything to do. And so I was writing and I was blogging a little bit. And anyway, eventually I got a job down there at a newspaper because I had worked at the newspaper in college and I knew I was a good writer. And so that was kind of the direction I took. But it wasn't really like, I didn't kind of graduate college and go, I'm going to be the next, great reporter. But yeah, I got a job at a newspaper and I learned a lot at that newspaper because there were deadlines and there was kind of excitement and community. And I really loved that environment. And that's how I decided that I wanted to stay in journalism. So and then I got my master's at Columbia School of Journalism in New York. So I moved to New York. I got jobs at various magazines in New York as a research editor and copy editor. And that probably went on for about 5 years. And then I kind of wanted something more. I didn't really see how I was going to move up in journalism. And print journalism seemed like it was collapsing, like there were fewer jobs, especially in New York. So I started looking around and there was a job to do some content writing and editing at startup. So still in New York. And I got the job, and I loved startup culture. That was a real startup. They had like I don't know all the lingo, but they had like their Series A round or whatever.
Oh, okay. Yeah. They're fun.
And the idea is it's Howcast. I don't know if they still exist, but it was kind of like a weird time. It was like 2008. And so, the idea, I guess, was the idea was to compete with YouTube, but only do how-to, but it didn't, I don't know, that idea sounds ludicrous now, but back then it didn't sound so crazy. But so we were doing how-to videos and there was a lot of experimentation with content there, which was really fun, especially because they were videos. So there was they were bringing in a lot of, and it's New York. So they were bringing in a lot of young creative filmmakers and just doing all kinds of interesting things. And I was working on the scripts. So I did that. I loved that. I found that I really loved, it was like a time in my life where I wanted to be around certain type of people and I didn't really care what the job was. Although, it was always writing and editing for me. So, but I learned a little bit about audience building too, because that was really important to them. They wanted eyeballs, the more they could prove that people wanted this, the more they could go for a next series of funding.
Yeah.
So that was where I started to learn a little bit about marketing, and I got laid off in 2011. And then I got other jobs, basically still in New York. I bounced around, really leaned on the fact that I had experience on the web. So I got web content jobs. I got sort of pseudo project management jobs. And then finally I landed at this nonprofit where we built a really robust and exciting website specifically for parents of children who have learning disabilities. And it was a site with 1 million views a month. And I was in charge of all social media for that. And that's where I learned a lot about marketing there and a lot about all kinds of things. But yeah. And so that sort of leads up to, we moved to San Diego when I was 30 weeks pregnant with my first son. And I kept my job at that nonprofit. And then I was working remotely and traveling to New York every 3 months or so. And it was a really good situation. I had no complaints. I had a good salary. And then it was almost like I was 22 again in university. And I was like, okay, I know how to do all this stuff. But instead of wanting to stay there, I was just kind of I could just do this or not do this, but I don't see where this is going, and I don't see how I'm going to grow from this. And so that's when it was about a year after we moved here, I decided to quit my job and start my own business.
Awesome.
Yeah.
And do you think it was something to do with becoming a mum that was that catalyst for saying, I want to do more than what I'm doing now?
Yeah, it's funny. So I've done some deep thinking about this because I hired a woman who I can plug her. Her name's Anna Lehman if people want to look her up, but she kind of gets you to think about why you're doing what you're doing and to talk about it and write it down. So it's hopefully by the time you post this podcast, my website copy will be completely redone. But yes, it's deeply connected. Not to say, I know a lot of entrepreneurs after they became mothers, they say they did it because they wanted like a more flexible schedule or situation. But for me, I actually did it because when I had my son, it was like a huge, everything was so hard. And it was so theoretically what that will be like, but my life was not my own anymore. And then my job was kind of like that too. Like, even though, I said like, it was a good situation. I really liked kind of not having to go in the office every day because before I had kids, it was really good and matched with my personality, but everybody in there was very type A, even though it was a nonprofit. It was a very well-funded nonprofit. And, it was kind of fancy office and everyone was, I would call them type A, like really like just go, go, go. And there were lots of meetings and people were always late for things. And it was just kind of that situation where, it was like, I don't know, everybody was just sort of striving. And I kind of felt like there were a lot of demands on me in that way, even though I was working remotely. So like my whole day was just about like, what does everybody want? What does other people, what does this person want? What does my son want? And everything was about helping somebody else move forward. And that's what I really landed on. That's what I realized. I didn't realize it until just a couple of months ago when I sat down and thought about, well, why did I quit my job? But it really was just kind of like, and I was pumping that whole first year. And so it was just kind of like, everything was about like, it really like pumping, it was just, everything was about like giving my resources, getting rid of my resources and giving them to somebody else all day long.
Yeah.
And so, yes, I think definitely that worked. So working a job like that before I had a baby worked because I still had all this time to myself in the evenings and on the weekends, unless my job bled into that. But yeah, after I had him, it was like, I was really losing my sense of myself. And it wasn't just about being tired and stuff. It was like, I just felt like I don't know. I was getting erased or something. It was really deep, like really bad. And so that's why, even though it was a good, like I said, it was a good, steady job. It wasn't anybody's fault, but it was like, yeah, definitely had a lot to do with having him. And I realized all along, at that point I was 35 or so, that for that 13 years since I'd graduated university, I hadn't really taken the bull by the horns. Like I hadn't been like, this is who I am. This is my goal with my career. Even though I was very driven and I worked very hard, I wasn't like, so, I'm sure this resonates with you, Janine. I bet you talk to a lot of women like this, but I wasn't like, yeah, I want to make this much money, or I want to be this type of person. I had nothing in mind. And so things kind of came to me, but I wasn't advancing. I hadn't ever had a managerial role, even though I'd had like really key roles at companies. So I didn't get recognition. I didn't have a chance to get promoted, and things like that really ate at me. Tired of waiting around to have someone else decide to make that happen for me. So I was like, well, if I start a business, I can just charge more. I mean, it's easier said than done, but when you cut your teeth, you charge more, you get higher quality clients. That's how you move up. And that's all dependent on you and the kind of risks you're willing to take and stuff like that. So although I didn't know that at the time when I first started my business, but I just kind of it's really weird because I'm not a person who follows my intuition, but it was a point in my life too, where it felt like it was going to be okay if I didn't make money right away. So, I knew that I wasn't going to we were going to be on the street if I quit my job and didn't have a clear sense of what I was doing.
Yeah.
So, yeah. So, it just anyway, sorry.
It's okay.
Got off on a tangent.
I think just what you're saying, people will definitely resonate with that whole piece of feeling like you almost lose yourself trying to figure out, well, who am I now? Like, yes, I am so-and-so's mom, but before that I was so much more. And now where do I go? What do I do? So a lot of people face that almost like identity crisis. Even if they did know what they wanted to do before, there always seems to be that wobble where people are like, what do I do? And if you're in a space where you're not quite sure what you want life to look like anyway, and then you become a mum, then it makes it even worse. So you can easily go down that spiral of, I just don't know. So yeah, I think a lot of people have had that experience. And then it does take some time and reflection and some thinking to figure out, like, okay, who am I now? And where do I want to go now?
Yeah.
But in terms of you and then like shifting into your business, how did you find that transition? Because going from being an employee to being a business owner isn't an easy transition. Like, people tend to say, go out on your own and just, you can do whatever you want, but actually getting started isn't as easy as people make out. So talk to us a bit about whether there were any challenges for you, or like how you felt when you first got going.
Yeah, it was like all one big challenge. I mean, it was like really hard. Still very hard. But I think the transition itself was very hard. Where my mind was at, it's really hard. Actually, I don't know if it's like a type of person, but even if you crave like being in charge of yourself, being your own boss, when you get that, it's really hard if you're used to somebody else telling you what to do with your time.
Yeah.
And so that was really hard. I didn't know what to do. And I'm very risk averse. I'm getting less so now, but everything in business requires a risk. Like, if you're going to take an action, call a person on the phone, pitch somebody, you risk getting said no to, which is hard at first, so because I didn't want to do anything risky, I barely did anything at first. I quit. When I quit, I had one client, and but that was not like a bill pay. Like, that was not a bill paying contract. It was just a thing. So figuring out. So I don't know. I started talking to people. I joined a co-working space. So I got a couple clients that way. Like, first I started with social media, because that was what I had been doing. So social media management, I guess, is what I was trying to do. And so, like, not ads, but just managing your social presence. And I wanted to do content because that's what I knew, but I didn't know how to sell myself. It was a very difficult transition. What else do you want to know?
No, I think it's good to speak to people who are open and transparent about the challenges, because sometimes it can seem rosy. Like, I speak to people who say, okay, I don't want to go back to my job, so I'm just going to start my own business. And that's great, but it's just educating people to realize that it's not necessarily the easy option. It's another option, but it isn't the easy option. No. And so it's good to hear, behind the scenes and what it really looks like for people who are in different industries.
That's such a good point. It's like, I do think part of me was like, the big catalyst was, I have to figure out what I want to be when I grow up. Like, I can't live my life. That was another thing kind of tied to my son. I want my son to watch, as he's growing up, and now I have two, as they're growing up, to watch me crush it, do something really. And that wasn't happening. And so that was really important to me. But on another level, it did seem it sounded sort of safer or something. It's like, well, I'll just like be on my own, and, and then I don't have to deal with, my boss and, whatever, and getting somewhere at a certain time every day, but yeah, those are benefits, I guess, but they come with all kinds of challenges. And the other thing I was going to say is when my business started actually accelerating and getting more fun to be in and making more money was when I shifted from, I want this and I want that, to what do I do for people that they need, and like being able to, and that's why I switched to email, because email was, when I learned email marketing, I already had the content background. And when I learned strategy, it was like, oh, so many people need this. Like, people started making more money in their businesses as a direct result of working with me. And then that was easier to sell. It wasn't like, oh, well, with social media, it was like, well, you'll just be producing content more consistently. And this was like, oh no, I'm making money for people. Like, and that was a lot easier of a sell. So when I shifted my mind a little bit to think about how can I help people? What do they need? it made it a little bit, I would say it made it easier to keep going.
Yeah. I love that. I think that approach applies in so many different ways. So I was actually working with a client yesterday. She's making like a flexible working request. So she wants to go back to work after maternity leave, and she wants to do so on a flexible basis. So when we were talking about how she should approach her request, I was saying, like, you need to first think about what value you add to the team. So instead of going in and being like, oh, I want to work flexibly because that works for me and my family, you're more saying, well, this is the value that I add. This is how I see it working. This is how I want to show you that you need me, so that you're going to say yes to the request. And it was a complete shift of thinking for her. And I think it applies in that respect. And then again, like you said, in business, it's how are you serving the people, and how can you communicate to them that they need what you have. So I think it's an amazing shift of perspective that we could all apply, depending on, regardless of which area it is that we're working and operating.
I know, that's such a good point, Janine. I was like on Inc.com or something, and I happened on this Tim Ferriss video, and Tim Ferriss is up and down for me with the things he says and thinks, but this, like, he's really smart about certain things. And he said, the question was, like, he was answering a question, how do you convince your boss that, like, it doesn't matter if you're in the office or not, as long as you get work done? And he was like, well, you have to work for, like, this was what he suggested. Work from home on Saturday for like 8 Saturdays, which sounds terrible, right? Mm-hmm. And then document that you actually get the same amount or more done or whatever, and then like show your boss the charts and like make a presentation, make a PowerPoint. It's like a lot of people won't actually put in that work. That's a lot of work, right?
Yeah.
A lot of people are just like, well, I'm sure it's better or it's the same, And it's like, no, you actually have to, from your boss's perspective, you have to show, because
bring the data.
Yeah. And the act of doing that, the fact that you were conscientious enough to do that shows that you probably won't like watch Netflix all day when you find chance. So it's just like, that's hard. So everything, you're right. Like starting your own business, hard. Like getting what you want in a corporate setting, hard. Like there's it's not like one of them, you need to jump to one of them because one of them's easier. It's just kind of like anyway, so totally agree with you.
And I think that it kind of goes to the whole piece about communication, which we're going to talk about in terms of email, in that it's all about effectively communicating to people and knowing what it is you need to say and when you need to say it to essentially get to where you want to get to. I think a lot of us don't think enough about how we're expressing what it is that we want beforehand. And so I'm really interested for you to share a bit more about how we can be more effective in our email communication, because we all email. So whether you're emailing prospective client and you're trying to, use email marketing in your business, or even in a corporate setting where you're trying to convince your peers or your bosses of something, we need to know like how we can be more effective with our communication in that way. So can you share with us some like golden nuggets in terms of our approach to email?
Oh yeah. So I do email marketing and copywriting, and it is a discipline. I've learned a lot. It's a discipline. I mean, it's an art, it's a science, whatever. But there are guides out there, and there are best practices. So when I was talking to Janine about what I do, I said like like a lot of these things apply to writing emails for business and like writing to your boss, writing to coworkers, because I remember working corporate job, like you get so much email, you don't read, people don't read it. I had a boss who didn't read any email, even though he insisted we communicate with him that way. And so it was really hard to know like how to get your message to, and I've learned some things in email marketing that I wanted to share. So some secrets. So again, here we go. Like my number one thing is you have to think like your customer. That's something that I, train my clients in as well. Like, stop thinking about what you want. Start thinking about what they want or what's going on with them. You're just one email in a sea of emails in their inbox. So what matters to them? What catches their eye? You need to know stuff like that. So what's their issue? I heard this on another marketing, Bushra Azar said this. What's their UTI? What's their burning problem, the number one thing that like if you mention it or you say you have a solution to it, they're going to jump up and down. They really want that. So think about that.
What does the acronym stand for? UTI.
Oh, UTI, urinary tract infection. I thought that was universal. Like, what's their burden? That's like if they can't sit down until they fix that, like what's their, or they can't move on until they fix that thing, right? That's like a really big, whatever their big problem is. So if your email relates to that UTI, to be the metaphor to death in any way, right? So like, let's say anyway, I mean, an example would be like, if you're, in my world with I worked a job that was very political in terms of there was tons of office politics. So if you could show your boss that he can, I'm just trying to pick a realistic example. Mm-hmm. You could show your boss that he could one up, another guy that's a guy that's lateral to him in another department or something, or he could show off, or, if that's kind of shit is really important to him, or her, but it's, whatever, him or her, then put that in your subject line, right? Don't put you can one up, Jane,
the name of the person,
something that's going to a nugget that's going to think like your customer. That's all I'm saying. Or think like the person that you're writing to. People always ask me how long a marketing email should be. So obviously I think in business they should be shorter, but if you're trying to communicate something really important, no matter what, actually, an email, and I know this is going to be hard for people to hear, an email should have one thing that it's trying to get the reader to do. So in marketing, we call that a call to action. Mm-hmm. One call to action. So don't set, I really believe this applies in all email. Don't send an email where you're trying to get people to do 2 or 3 different things, remember different things, right? Make an appointment and also do something else. Whatever you're trying to get them to do, the action should be at the bottom. Mm-hmm. And of a shortish email, bolded or bulleted out, and it should be one thing. So if I don't know, that's hard sometimes, but yeah, if you can really think about only sending email when it's super necessary and only asking for one thing, mm-hmm. You're going to get a lot more juice out of your emails. Another thing that I think really works well is, or something to think about. So there's types of subject lines. So yeah, but anyway, there's types of subject lines that work better than others, right? So if you're not thinking hard about your subject line, then there's room for improvement, because people prioritize their inbox, they're scanning, right? So especially if they get a lot of email. So in order to stand out, like I already mentioned, one thing would be put in your subject line, you've solved some kind of problem for them, right? Something is about to get easier. They are going to want to open that email, right? Another one I like. So here's one. I mean, this is literally, spark curiosity, right? You'll notice marketing emails, you might get a subject line that's this is the one way to add $5,000 a month to your income, or something like that. That's mm-hmm. a super marketing kind of subject line that's sort of playing this game. You could think about, is there a way to spark curiosity in your subject line? Is there here's one I came up with. The subject line could be we finally got it. And then they need to click to find out what the it is.
What is the it?
Yeah.
I love
it. Just think about is there ways to put things in the subject that they're well, God, I really need to know what that is now. And it's fun, right? Yeah. The second way with subject lines is to make it urgent, right? So include the name of a VIP in the subject line if it relates to the VIP. I'm thinking about this one job I had where the boss's boss, he was so important. And so if I had, if it related to him in any way, his name is Nodder, Nodder needs XYZ, or Nodder said, this is for Nodder, whatever, then my boss would have opened that email. So, okay. Or you can just put action needed, or we need a decision. I don't know, this is too many words, but action needed by 5 p.m. or, action needed by 2 p.m., right? Just, if it's really true, don't lie. But if it's really true that this cannot move forward until something happens, then you can put something like that. So yeah, other tricks that marketers use, and if you look at your emails marketing emails you'll see these patterns. Say something direct, a really direct benefit. So what if they open this email, again, I guess I'm kind of covering the same base a different way. If they open this email, some kind of problem will get solved. What is going to get easier in their life if they open this email? Then they'll definitely open it, right?
Yeah.
And the third the third kind of area I was going to cover is indifference, which I think is really interesting. And it's something I'm learning when I work with prospective clients or, leads. Don't be too excited. Because oddly, when you seem like too accommodating, you can meet at any time. You will email back right away, no matter what. And I know different office cultures are different, but people tend to deprioritize you because they know that they can always get you. So one thing I've started doing, because I watched something random on like Forbes.com, but it really stuck with me, was I stopped using exclamation points in my email, or I use them really, really sparingly. So if somebody's making a request of me, like they want to make a meeting, and this is with like a lead especially, I won't go, sure, exclamation point. I'll go, sure, comma, or sure, period. Here's my count, make an appointment with this link, or I have Tuesday at 4:15 open or whatever. But it's just like these little things. I think there's an overuse of exclamation points, especially by women. And it just makes it seem like we're really excited. We're really amped all the time. And it just kind of makes a lot of our communication less meaningful. What were you going to say?
No, I was just going to say it's really funny because I think it depends on how you view exclamation marks. So I remember when I was working as a corporate lawyer in my firm, I had a trainee in my team. No, actually she was a paralegal. And she used to put exclamation marks in everything, like every other sentence. And it actually got me annoyed. So I didn't think that she was enthusiastic. I felt like she was being sarcastic. Like it was almost like, yeah, I done that piece of work, exclamation mark. And can you let me know what to do next? Like to me, the tone was more like I don't know, I just take it as more sarcasm as opposed to enthusiasm. And so if I saw emails with loads in, it really turned me off. I was just like, what is wrong with this girl? Like, who does she think she is? Like, why is she doing this all over the email?
I did an audit of, just for myself, really, although I should do a video about this. I looked at all the Black Friday email I got, just looked in my inbox, looked in my promotions folder in Gmail, and just scrolled and looked at the different subject lines. And I got one that had 4 exclamation points in the subject line, like in a row, like, oh, wow, last chance. And I was just
shouting at me.
Yeah, it's like, I'm either going to open your email because I'm interested or I'm not, but 4 exclamation points is not going to be the thing that like makes me think like, oh, this is really urgent.
Right.
It's like, either I want your thing, like I never wanted her thing because it was like a product related to a newborn or something. And I don't have a newborn anymore. It's like one of those things.
Yeah.
It's like 4 exclamation points is not going to. So I just think like people don't think about what actually matters to a person.
Yes.
Want to open that. It's not the amount of excitement you have about it. Like, so stop.
Yeah. And I think that reminds me of, just one other thing, just, like when people write in capital letters in emails, I also feel like they're shouting at me. So I think that it's important to think about your audience and think about like, is this the type of person that would take the way that I'm writing this in the way that I don't intend it to be taken, and then adjust accordingly? Because if someone capital letters everywhere, I'm just like, what are they shouting? So, it's really interesting.
It is. I mean, and in this video I was watching about the exclamation points, Barbara Corcoran was in it. She's like, I don't know if you guys get the same TV we do, but she's on Shark Tank, and she's sort of like this, she's like one of these entrepreneurial celebrities or whatever. Mm-hmm. And she was like, when I get an email from a woman with a bunch of exclamation points, I feel like, this is what she said, I feel like that woman doesn't really think I'm going to give her the thing that she's asking for, or, what I mean? Yeah. And I was like, okay. Whoa. And I was mad because I was like, ugh, that's so sexist. But then I was like, well, and then she said, the other thing she said too, and if you'll notice, if anyone listening, like communicates with a corporate bigwig who's a man, she was like, the most powerful businessmen I communicate with by email, if first of all, if they check it or if they ever do use email, they don't even use punctuation. Like, and their emails are super short because they have that, they know you're going to listen, like, because they know that they're important. And so like that's and I mean, if you're not that important in your job or whatever, then don't, pretend you are, but just kind of have that in mind that like what you say, what you write is should be strong enough on its own without caps, like you said, or whatever, or exclamation points. So anyway, that's like kind of a thorny one. But I think there is in sales too, there's this idea of indifference. Like you can buy it, but if you don't buy it, there's other people out there who need it and want it. So it's really up to you. This is what it is. And that kind of selling that way is, I found, more enticing. And so it's kind of the same thing in email. It's like, if you seem more desperate for somebody to do whatever the thing is, like they're going to be more turned off. So anyway, interesting.
Yeah, very interesting. Oh, awesome. So those are like, amazing principles that we can start thinking about and thinking, okay, well, how can I apply this in my next communication by email?
I hope so.
Yeah, that's awesome. Thank you. So one of the things I like to ask my guests for any words of advice that you would give to somebody who's a mum who maybe is thinking about transitioning into her own business, or is at the stage where she's thinking about what the next steps are. Like, now that you're looking back, do you have any like nuggets of wisdom that you can share on that point?
Sure. I think it's really important to do things before you're ready. So just sell somebody something or that's the bottom line. Talk to people, pitch, gather up some confidence from somewhere and make this, like, ask for the sale, whatever it is. Like, even if you're just thinking about a business, go see if there's clients out there. Doing things is way more important than planning, even though planning is really fun. And planning, I guess maybe I do it wrong, but planning is good, right? You definitely want to have a big goal in mind and like little mini goals for how to get there. But it never works out the way I plan it. A year never goes the way I think it's going to go. A lot of times things go better than I think they're going to go. Or, a lot of times what happens is I get an opportunity because I'm doing stuff. That opportunity makes things go faster or leads it down a different path. So that's my number one piece of advice, because when I first started, like I said, I was so afraid to do things, and it made everything go really slowly. Yeah. It was like nothing happened because I was like, well, I don't know. And I was looking for the perfect opportunity. I'm a perfectionist, and you can't recognize the perfect opportunity. You won't see it. So you have to do a lot of things. And then figure it out. Looking backwards, you'll be like, oh, that was a great opportunity. I'm so glad I showed up at that event. I'm so glad I followed up with that person and got on the phone with them, whatever. And I think the other thing too is like, just talk to as many people as possible. Like it's good to have a strategy in mind or a time limit, but like, be doing informational interviews with people all the time, like other business women, people who are in your industry or niche, or, just talk to them without necessarily wanting to get anything from them, but just sort of get a sense for, just ask some questions, but don't expect them to like give you an opportunity or whatever. But I'm pretty new at what I'm doing. I've only been doing email for 2 years. And so I talk to lots of people all the time. It just coalesces, it's like it even if I don't have like a specific goal in mind, eventually like people will know people, they'll introduce me to people that turn into clients, and so, but if you're not talking to people, you never get those. You only have your own resources. Yes. So you need to talk to people. You need to be able to, even the biggest introvert, they'll tell you, people who have their own businesses, that they do think that's really important.
Yeah. I love the fact that you said you need to, just start doing stuff. It's so easy to be in the planning mode all the time and feel like you're busy because you're planning and you're working on your website and you're doing all this stuff, but actually it's not moving anything forward. So I would definitely echo that you need to get out there, talk to people. And even if you're in corporate and you're saying, I want to move into a different role, a different direction, you also need to be talking to people and find out how they got to where they are, if that's where you want to get to. Yeah. So I think the key is to look for other people who are where you want to be and get talking and networking. That's really important.
Yeah. And talk to them. Renee, this woman that Janine and I both work with, she always says you need to identify the person you want to talk to. That's step one, but also kind of come up with an excuse or a reason. So it helps if you guys have a common interest. You notice that they wear the same kind of earrings that you also, or not earrings is a bad example, but they have there's some kind of commonality, and there's just like a way to talk, or they both, they have young kids and you have young kids, or that's always a great way to when you find that out and like, you're like, oh yeah, I've got, and it's like really great when they're really close in age, I've got a 15-month-old. Oh yeah, I've got an 18-month-old. And then it's like, oh, is he walking? And then, you get that in. So look for those kind of things instead of like focusing on, oh, I really need to talk to them or I need something from them. Just focus on like, how can you start a conversation?
Yeah. And then see where that goes.
So that it's not so pressurized. But yeah. Anyway.
Thank you. So true. I'm with you on that. So the other thing I'd like to ask people is to share an inspirational quote or a mantra or saying that you find useful, because I just love that type of thing, and I try and make note of new ones. And so I'd love for you to share if you have one.
I've got some here in my office. I guess my favorite one is, if it is to be, it is up to me, because it's very simple. I love reading that one when I sit down every day. Like, if the thing is going to happen, that's what we were just talking about. I'm going to have to do something. So yeah,
I love the way you say to me. I really like that. I think that's so important, because sometimes we can think, that saying whatever will be, and if it's for me, no one can take it away, and all that stuff. That there's part of that that's true, but you have to do, like, there's the element of you taking action as well. And so yeah, I think that's awesome. Maggie, it's been so good talking to you. Thank you so much for sharing all of your golden nuggets. So now I'm going to go back and look in my email inbox and see how I can respond to people differently.
Wonderful. Yay. Thank you so much for having me, Janine. I really enjoyed it.
That's okay. And if people want to find out more about what you do and reach out to you, where's the best place for them to find you?
Right. So come to my website or Instagram. It's the same, MaggieFrankHSU.com or Maggie Frank HSU on Instagram. That's where I'm there all the time. And you can also snag a freebie from me all about email, and just kind of check me out.
Awesome. So I'll put the links to that in the show notes so people can check you out. But I really appreciate your time today. It's been awesome chatting to you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Janine.
Thank you.
Did that interview just get you thinking that we need to be far more intentional about our email communication and communication in general? It certainly did for me. I think as women, we are often taking more of the passive approach as opposed to active when it comes to moving towards what it is that we want and communicating with people that can help us to get to where we want to get to. I thought it was really interesting what she said about how people in high positions, especially men, tend to use communication in a different way. So they tend to have shorter emails, they tend to speak in a different way. Women sometimes qualify what they say, so they may say a statement and then afterwards say things like, does that make sense? Or they might ask for permission to contribute their what they want to say to a conversation. And those things, those small nuances can make a difference to how people perceive you and how people tend to treat your communication. So it's worth just paying attention to some of those things. Are you showing up as someone who's assured and confident in what you're saying and what you're able to add to the conversation or to the email? Or are you coming at the situation or the conversation in a way where you are feeling inferior, but are you using words and are you communicating in a way that demonstrates that to the person that you're speaking to? So just look at that, check that. That could make a huge difference to the results that you're getting in terms of where you're trying to go in your career, if you're climbing the ladder, or in your business and as you work with clients on a day-to-day basis. In addition to the really useful communication tips that Maggie shared with us, it was great to hear about her journey too, and how even though she is someone who excelled academically, that didn't necessarily mean she knew what direction she wanted to go in with her career. And it took her some time, some twists and some turns to get to where she is today, where she's doing work that she enjoys and serving clients in a way that matches with her skill set. But it really is challenging sometimes to figure out what is the next thing, especially if you have become a mum and that has led to a change in values and perspectives, and you're in a place where you're like, I really don't know what it is I want to do. If that's you, then I invite you to download our career options guide, which includes 17 career options that you may not have thought about post motherhood. So you can grab that in the show notes, as well as links to Maggie's website and her social media handles. So head over to lightboxcoaching.com/episode 56 so you can grab all of those. If you are enjoying the Careers Beyond Motherhood podcast, can you do me a favor? Could you just take a few moments to leave us a rating and review? So however you're listening to this podcast in your podcast app, you can leave a rating or review, or you can head over to iTunes and leave it there. Ratings and reviews help more people to find the show and join in the conversation. So I'd really appreciate if you take the time to leave us one. Okay, so that's all from me this week. I will speak to you again very soon. In the meantime, look after you and look after your babies. This podcast features music from Ben Sound.